What's up, lovely people? Good to see your faces. Welcome, everyone. We always start by acknowledging the traditional custodians throughout Australia. And the last couple of ones, I've forgotten to do my acknowledgement. So I made a little post-it note to do mine. I want to pay my respects to Aboriginal elders, past, present, and emerging of the land I'm standing on today. And also pay respects to my ancestors, your ancestors, our ancestors, for the platform they have built for us to do cool shit. Welcome to the last one last talk session. It's good to have you here. We've been talking about how to actually wrap this up, and it was a really interesting conversation. But Philip, how are you? What's
good?
Sunny in Ireland?
Is it sunny? Is that what you said?
Correct.
It's never sunny in Ireland, like ever, unless you're watching Netflix or something, and then sometimes it's sunny. But it's actually no, it wasn't too bad today. Well, today was a good day. It only rained for maybe 8 hours straight. That's all. No, it didn't. But I'm good.
It's like like how they say blue moon, right? In Ireland, it's a sunny day. Let's get straight into it. We ended last time on what everyone was not saying, and we're talking about what we edit for the world. And by the way, today the football world lost a legend, Diego Maradona, which is really crazy because he's only 60 years old, and he suffered towards the end of his life in different forms, in different ways. But the thing that I think about when I think of Maradona is what an impact he just see that everyone knows, even though he struggled so much and he did this thing, there's so much of stuff. But when you think about the life that he led, if there was a bit more peace, that would have been so much better for everyone, with such a talent, such a gift. But yeah, Philip, sorry, I just wanted to say that.
Don't know where to go now. So what was that? What did you share about what Jurgen Klopp? We're talking about football. We're talking about soccer, by the way. What did you share? What Jurgen Klopp, the manager of Liverpool, said today about Maradona?
Yeah, it was really interesting because we knew that Maradona struggled. It was such a talented human being, and when they asked Jurgen Klopp about saying something about him, he said a lot of good things about him, and he said at the end that Diego was an amazing human being, but Maradona struggled to live his life, and I will miss both.
It's a question for all of us to think about. I've never actually asked this question, but it was inspired by what you just shared there a minute ago, 5 minutes ago before we came on, and that is this idea that does the significance of your light or the significance of your gift, is it amplified by the depth of pain that you yourself have experienced? In other words, you can only be as magical as the darkest part of you. That the reason, let's just say that's true for a second, that the reason Maradona was so good in certain moments of his life and so extraordinary and turned out to be such a legend as it relates to sport, is because he had so many demons at such a deep fundamental level. And I'm not saying that's true. I'm just asking you to think about that, to contemplate that. That's not where we plan to start, but that's maybe something to think about it as it relates to your own individual lives. So welcome. I know we have a couple of new faces. I don't know if you guys know, but does anybody think that my muscles are bigger today? Because I did a workout today in Ireland. Sean is actually online here today, and he beat the shit out of me at around 1 o'clock today. And then we got chatting, and he said he'd join us today. So a shout out to Sean. I had to put one weight down because I thought my little chicken legs were going to snap at one point. But anyway, there you go. So good to see you, Sean. but I appreciate some of you haven't been here for the last 3 weeks, so there may be things that don't make any sense or don't have context. So just trust where it goes and see what happens. Okay. So I want to start off by for some of you, you do podcasts. For some of you, you want to do a podcast. Some of you may never do a podcast, but you're here because you're very curious about bringing your voice to the world in some capacity. We're not here flogging podcasts, 101. We don't have a 25-step system to how to build the best podcast, etc. So what we're trying to do is get people to find that voice inside themselves, the one that maybe hasn't been heard in the world, and begin to bring that to the world. And if nothing else comes from this and you decide to have a conversation with somebody, and I genuinely feel I can speak for Ronsley in this, because I know where Ronsley's heart is in this. If nothing comes from this other than maybe some healing for you or a conversation you have with somebody in your life as a result of this, and you never do a podcast, I certainly will be disappointed. So if you're walking down the street, don't do one of these, and try not to look at me, because you'll be afraid I asked you, oh, by the way, did you do a podcast? Because I saw your face 3 times in a row on those calls. There's no expectation in relation to us in that regard. But I do want to ask a question. And the question is surrounded kind of around the idea of podcasting, because that's the context and the container that we have here today. But what is the biggest single block that would prevent you from executing and bringing a podcast into the world? And again, podcast is the word. Replace it with finding your voice, like speaking your truth, bringing it into the world. What is the single biggest thing that would prevent you from bringing a podcast into the world, from developing a podcast, or pivoting an existing one, that perhaps you've been doing for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, but it's just beginning to wane a little bit, and it's bothersome because you told the world you were going to do it 5 days a week, and it was the most passionate thing you could ever imagine, but you're kind of getting bored with it now, because really you're trying to, hold on to something that's fucking dead already. And it's been dead probably for the last 12 months or 24 months, but you just can't let it go, because it has defined a part of your identity within your community. I also want you to think about, and this is one last thing here, I'm going to pick on Sean, for example. So Sean is I know he doesn't look like he works out, but I don't think he does actually. But anyway, he's Irish, so I can make fun of him. Ronzi's a little bit sensitive, but anyway, don't just assume that because you're in fitness, you have to do a fitness podcast. Okay, don't make that assumption. Okay, I think that is one of the classic mistakes that people make, is that they just assume that because of the skill set they have, because of the talents that they have, that is the only thing that they are needed for in the world, or the only thing they're capable of doing. I find that is absolutely not the case whatsoever. So let's just take a few minutes on that. And I want to share a story that came up yesterday with a coaching client who is a coach himself. And I think it's a fascinating insight into things that block us and hold us back as it relates to bringing our voice to the world. So I'd like you to take a few minutes to write down what are 1 or 2 of the things that block you from bringing your voice and your gift into the world. And then we'll maybe bring you, I'll let Ronzi decide that if you want to bring people into, and try to narrow it down to one thing. Like I see judgment, fear, and shame. Go deeper than that, Jay, with respect. And I appreciate you sharing that with everybody, but just name it, lean into one of those things, and be a bit more, kind of flesh it out a little bit more. Fear of what? Shame around what? Judgment. You don't have to share it now. You can share it in your group, or you can just hold it within yourself. But I think we're too fast to say, oh yeah, fear holds me back. Well, fear what? Well, I'm afraid that it won't be successful. Okay, but what does that mean? What does a lack of success mean? Well, it brings me back to when I was 14 and such a thing happened. Well, let's get in touch with what actually happened. And you'll find that fear is not as probably prominent and as effective a tool to dismantle your dreams as you might think. But go beyond the fear and dig in a little bit further, and it might be very, very useful. So just take a couple of minutes and begin to imagine what that might be. A lot of grumpy looking people to the Ronsley. I was going to say, did somebody die? Well, of course, Maradona did die, but
I think I started it off with an obituary, so it didn't really help that cause.
No.
But that's a really good point. Like when you think about the things we say, because it's so common to say when someone asks us the questions, right? Because we go to masterminds, we go to groups, we meet a lot of people, and they say, so how can I help you? What's holding you back? What are the obstacles? What can I do for you? And it's the common answers we give, because we feel like we have to answer, we have to know something, we got to say something, we got to respond. Um, but then there's this deeper level of why we respond in certain ways, and why we hide a certain part of ourselves from the world, and including ourselves, right? When you look in, like, in the mirror. When I did my first 2-day event with Philip, on the first day, Philip asked us all, actually, it was a group of like amazing human beings. I think Travinia was there in Boulder. This was this was a while ago, maybe 18 months ago, I feel. But one of the questions was, what are you not saying? Which obviously we've asked you, right? What are you not? Sorry, it was what? Yeah, what were you not doing? And I was like, I'm doing whatever I want to do. Like, I have the greatest clients. I'm traveling around the world with my wife. We're staying in these amazing places. We're having these conversations. I was recording for Psychology of Entrepreneurship, and I could not just answer that question. And then on the final day, on the next day, at the end, it hit me. Sorry, the question was, what do you need to stop doing? And what I was thinking to myself, I was doing everything I wanted to do. And on the last day, it hit me. I had to stop hating my body. And for 38 years, I hated my body. I didn't look at myself in the mirror. I didn't look at my body in the mirror. So on that note, that's what Philip is talking about, to go deeper than what is the shame, what is the fear, what are you running away from?
Can I suggest, Ronsley, that we don't do breakout rooms today? I mean, if you want to do them, I'm more than happy to do them, but I'm just not feeling it today. I just think I'd love to hear from a few people on the call and ask them to share, and be courageous in your sharing, and just see where it goes. Because another quick reminder is, our sharing is not about us. It's actually for the benefit of others. And I think if you think about sharing like that, number one is it's often faster. People don't tend to give a 25-minute backdrop of the context. And secondly is they tend to be a little bit more courageous when they're sharing with the hope or the possibility that somebody else in the call might actually learn something from their share. Often in a room, some of the greatest insights and breakthroughs I've witnessed is not from me. At the top of the room, the side of the room, wherever I sit, it's actually from the people in the room themselves. So does anybody want to unmute and share? For example, Glenn, who I don't know, but like I know your face just from the last couple of sessions.
You can hear me, yeah?
Sharing? Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, not so bad. I was just thinking the reason why you look like you have bigger muscles, Philip, is because of your waterlogged Aran jumper.
Absolutely.
That's probably the reason.
Yeah, you get this thing wet, and I tell you, it's a workout walking around.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, geez, it's good to see so many Irish faces on here tonight. Anyway, but apart from that, for me, I think my biggest issue, my biggest fear, really is to not be the expert that might be expected of somebody who's just finished a PhD. I don't feel like an expert. I feel worn out, and I feel I feel like hiding from it, to be honest. It's not something I want at this stage, is to have the burden of that bloody qualification. It cost me so much. I don't mean just financially, I mean emotionally, energy, probably even cognitively. I feel burnt out. So after all that, I feel like I'm probably at a point where I just want to run away from it and not use it. My wife told me today that I'll do anything. Two people mentioned the PhD to me today, one of whom was Brandon Adams. I don't know if you know him, Philip, but you certainly know Bronzy, and I'm sure lots of the rest of you do anyway. But I was speaking to him today, and I complimented him on a book he had just written, and he said, "Oh, that's great coming from, you know, a PhD in psychology. Not like, no, I'm just an ordinary bloke who just thought your book was good. That's all." And
Glenn, if you don't mind me interrupting just for a moment, please.
yeah,
Why did you do a PhD?
that's the point, isn't it? Yeah, it kind of happened accidentally. Honestly, it happened accidentally. I applied for the thing. I never believed I would get it, and then I got an offer of the place. And then I turned to my wife and said, "I've been offered this PhD, but we can't afford it." And she said, "No, we can't." And I said, "Well, we won't do it." And then I applied for a scholarship, and they gave me a scholarship for it. So I ended up getting paid to do it. So I did it. And I thought I would finish it a lot quicker than I would, but I ended up taking a lot longer than I expected. So it took
Can I ask you another question?
toll. Yeah.
Because I can feel the exhaustion, and I'm just trying to understand where the exhaustion comes from. And it's maybe not for today, but I have one last question for you. That is, did you do the PhD because you felt you needed to, or because you desperately wanted to?
I didn't want to desperately do it. I actually didn't want to desperately do it. I asked myself so many times while I was doing it, why am I doing this? And I just kept going. I think Ronsley actually said it to me before. I had, when I was joining this group, I had put up as my motto, "I get knocked down, but I get up again." And Ronsley was saying, well, maybe sometimes you just need to stay down. And I think part of my character is that no matter what happens, I just get back up again and I take more. And I've been doing that for just a couple of decades now.
How's it working?
Oh, shit.
Exactly.
It's not working.
I'm going to challenge you on your motivation for doing the PhD,
Yeah.
but I'm not here to detract or diminish what you did. I mean, I don't know anything about education really, because I'm dyslexic and I failed pretty much everything. But at the same time, I have appreciation for people who go and study, whether it's being a chiropractor or whether it's a PhD, whether it's in business school, whatever it is. So I'm not trying to diminish what you did, nor am I one of these people that think all education is screwed, because I didn't actually go into it in advance, like every single person I went to school with. But I often find one thing for sure is that a lot of people go into further education, not because they really want it, is because at some level, whether it's significant or subtle, they feel that they need it in order to advance. They need it in order to be an authority.
Mm-hmm.
They need it in order to be an authority. And I said to somebody the other day, go and do this thing if you really want to, but don't go and do it because you feel you need it. It's the same with love, the same with relationships, the same with intimate partners. It's the same with a business partner. Is the amount of people that take on a business partner or a co-host in a podcast, bringing it back to this container, not because they really, really want that person, is because they feel inadequate in certain areas. And the inevitability of most business partnerships, in my experience, is you find out two things. One is you're as good in that area or better in that area than you thought. And secondly, is the person that you brought in to cover that area, whatever that area is, isn't quite as efficient or as effective as you thought they would be. I'm not saying that's the inevitability of every single relationship in a business context, but it's quite common. I do, out of respect, want to move on, but I'd love you to sit with this idea of needing it rather than wanting it, if that makes any sense. Anybody else? Let's hear from somebody else, please. Sorry, Ronsley. Yeah, go ahead. How do you pronounce your first name?
Me?
Yes.
Sierra.
Yeah, okay. Again, I told you I was dyslexic, so don't take it personally if I can't pronounce your name.
Nobody can.
I was going to attempt it, but I guarantee I would have butchered it. So there you go.
What would you have said?
Kira.
I would have said you Clark. I would have said something like that, because I would have just ignored the first one because it looked too complicated to me.
That's okay. Everybody messes it up, so I wouldn't have taken it personally.
Let's go.
I would say that the two biggest things. First thing is that I feel like I feel like I can't keep myself 100% consistent.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to stop for a second, and you're just going to add in one very complex addition to this little session here, and that is called breathing. And that's all I want you to do. And then when you're ready, you can start again. And the last thing I'll ask you to do is never, ever, ever apologize for crying or for being emotional, because that's called being human.
Okay. So it's being 100% consistent. I feel like in my days, every day, I want to strive for being 100% consistent with myself and with everybody in my life and everything that I do. And sometimes when I fall off the train, I don't want to promote myself out there because I'm like, I fell off the train. How can I teach you?
So can I ask you a question? Are you dating anybody or married?
Yeah, I'm married.
What's his or her name?
Colin.
How does Colin do when he's not consistent with your expectations?
When you mean like my expectations for him or my
Yeah.
expectations?
No. We know we know you have Mount Everest expectations on your shoulders. That's a given, and that was heavier than the weights that Sean asked me to lift today. That's for sure. I'm curious to know the ramifications and the costs from those around you, because when you have high expectations on self, typically they transfer and translate onto other people, whether you like it or not, or want it or not.
Yeah. It's caused a lot of relationship issues, not just with my husband, but with other people.
Yeah. And it's going to continue to do so, and it's going to have a massive effect. I know you and I have never spoken, I believe, before, and if we have, I apologize. So I have to speculate a little bit to try to fill in the gaps as soon as we can here. But I'm just curious, where does that overwhelming expectation of being consistent and being consistent to the level of, I would say, fucking impossibility, quite frankly, where does it come from?
I think for years I lived my life thinking that everything has to be perfect. I think that I try everything in my world to be 10 steps ahead, to not ever make a mistake. I never want to make a mistake or disappoint anybody, and that's why I try.
Who did you disappoint in your past?
I think it was my dad. My dad probably told me he's proud in my life. So I tried.
You say that again. You broke up. Your dad what?
My dad probably told me he was proud of me once in my life. So
what did you do to get his pride?
Everything that he's been trying to teach me, from being young to now, everything I've ever done, all of my steps to now, he's just said, well, you should have done it this way. Oh, you made a mistake. You should regret it now. You shouldn't have done that. And so,
okay, so how many people do you think are out in the world right now looking to be perfect?
Maybe
raise your hand just on this call, and this is a small group of people. Raise your hand if perfection creeps in. Maybe it doesn't dominate your life, but if perfection creeps in at some level and gets in the way sometimes. Okay, so most people on the call, if not almost everybody. So how can you begin to bring, obviously, what is something that's very, very painful for you? And if you've done lots of work on this, you've done therapy, and you've done heavy lifting around this, again, I'm not here to diminish the work you've done, but to some extent, you can't outwork this pain. You can't outwork this trauma. At some point, you've got to do something with it. And I find that the most extraordinary thing you can do is to take the trauma that you can't work out of your life and begin to actually say and work with, what did I learn from this? How can I go back and support other people? How can I take the pain that I've been through and go out into the world and help all these other, not just women, but men with this curse of perfectionism? And I'm going to share a story. Ronsley, please shut me down, because I'm not here to take this call over. But this lady's after giving us a doorway into a story I really want to share. And it comes from yesterday. And I spoke to a young man, he's a coach, and he basically, one thing he's scared of and has been procrastinating and moving away from, was this idea of running retreats, group retreats. And I said, why is that? He goes, oh no, I know exactly what the issue is. He says, I'm a perfectionist. And I know when I start to look at planning it and putting it together, that it's almost impossible to make it perfect. So I just don't do it. So I procrastinate on it, right? And I said, great. I said, well, you obviously know this solution. You know exactly what's going on. So please continue. He goes, no, that's it. And I said, it's not. I said, you've written half the book. You have half the problem solved, or you have half the awareness of what's actually going on. because procrastination, in my personal opinion, is not procrastination as it is in the dictionary and as it is presented in society. Okay, it's often the output or the outcome of something else. In his case, I presented this idea that he's not looking for perfection, which leads to procrastination. It's actually all about protection. It's all about trying to protect himself. And that's why he procrastinates. That's why he wants it to be perfect, because he wants to keep himself fucking safe, which is all about control. And the more people try to control their lives, it not shows how much in control they want to be or how secure they want to be. It's driven by an absolute underlying perspective of insecurity. That's what's driving the need for security, is insecurity. So I'd love you to think about, where in your life are you trying to protect yourself with all these expectations? Because it's not perfection, I don't really think. I think that's a great excuse, or with respect, maybe the greatest story you've told yourself to date. It's time to let that one go. And I would love you to sit with this idea of, where are you trying to protect yourself and why? And you've got a great insight, because you know what? You're protecting yourself. You just don't want to make a mistake. So you're stifled, and you just don't move. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Ronzi, I'll kick it back to you, and let's see where we go.
Philip, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing. Thank you.
Well, I think this is great. I mean, this is really valuable to see how brave people are and to help others tap into. So a lot of the times we don't know where the courage is going to come from, and then you hear people come on and pretty much show you how brave you can be. So I really, really love this, and if there's anyone else that would like to put their hand up, maybe we can tap into that and hopefully take away some courage from you. Jay.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. It's boy, that's a tough one to follow. So much strength, Sierra. Amazing. Thank you for sharing. So I look back, and I have struggled with comparison and the shame that's tied to that since I was a young kid. And where it comes from, I'm not 100% sure, but I do know that there were many times where my parents, primarily my mother, would compare me to others that were in my peer group as a small kid. And, I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't obtaining grades. I wasn't, there were a number of things that I just was not as good as someone else. And that stuck with me. And so through the years, that was always speaking to me on one side of my mind. And on the other side, I was always looking to be able to overcome that, push through, and figure out, how can I gain that standing? And, there is that perfectionist side as well, where as I look at it, I'm just constantly trying to prove something. I say I'm trying to prove it to myself, but the reality is I'm trying to prove it to others. Or at least I believe I am. But it doesn't keep me from doing the things that I need to do. So I wouldn't say that I procrastinate, but what I do is I will sometimes not execute on something until the 11th hour, because I'm using that compressed time and that pressure to energize me and push me over the edge. But I do absolutely need to make sure that everything is done to the highest level that I possibly can. So, for me, it is that pain and that shame that I feel that keeps me at times from moving in certain directions. And
Jay, can I just jump in? How much
Sure.
how much fun do you have in your life?
There are many things that I enjoy, Philip. I could definitely have more fun.
Because I'm going to ask you to challenge your own story I'm not going to necessarily challenge it, but maybe in a way I am. That story, and that it was very brief, but it was that story that it doesn't prevent me doing the things I want to do. And I find that actually forget about finding the right language for this. But when you are trying to make other people proud, when you're trying to you're at some level looking for their approval, or you're doing it with high expectations from others, fill in the blank. It could be various or a combination of all of those and more. Is it doesn't necessarily prevent you from doing the things you want to do, but I find that we waste a lot of times doing stuff we think that they want us to do. So in a way, indirectly, we don't get to the shit that we really want to do, or we haven't even given ourselves permission to think about the things we want to do. And I'll give you an example. So what I do for the most time is I run live intimate experiences, whether it's a trip to India, whether it's to Guatemala, whether it's to Ireland, whether it's wherever it is, right? And I remember in India, it was around maybe 3 years ago or whatever. I think it was in India, and somebody asked me a question. They said, "Philip, do you mind me asking, how do you curate these trips? Like, how do you craft these experiences, like where you go and everything else?" And I said, listen, we're under a bit of pressure. The bus or the train is going soon, but I'll do my best to kind of sum it up. But it's quite scientific. And of course, they didn't know me that well, and they should have known there's very little science in what I do. And I said, I pick places I want to go, and I design a trip that I want to do, and I invite people to come and join me. And she looked at me, and she had a combination of being absolutely in awe of the simplicity of that, and she was annoyed that that's possible. And what a lot of people do is they chalk that down to, oh, because you have the money or you do this or whatever it happens. When I live like that, that's when everything works its best. And the irony of this is the man I spoke to yesterday has finally given himself permission after like 9 years, and I know it's been 9 years, to go to Costa Rica for a month in January. And one of the voices that he hears and he's heard when the minute he made the decision to go to Costa Rica, which he's wanted to do for years, he said, what are people going to say? What are my coaching clients going to think? And I said to him something very, very interesting. At least I think it was interesting. I'm not trying to pretend I'm interesting, but what I said was kind of interesting. That is, clients are going to come to you, not for your coaching. They're going to come to you because the life that you inhabit. It doesn't mean we go out and try and live a life to attract people. But I can't tell you how many people, some of them are on this call, that have come to me and said, I want to go to Brave Soul. I want to join this. I want to join that because I met you and your family in India, or I met you and your family in Guatemala, or I saw you with your wife, or whatever it happens to be. In other words, they're not watching the coaching techniques or whatever it happens to be. They're actually watching the way in which you fucking show up every day, which I never knew. Someone should have told me that earlier, but if they did, I probably would have tried to orchestrate it because I was so insecure and so not insincere. I think the sincerity, at least a hope, was always there, but I would have tried too hard to do that. And I didn't know all this time people were actually watching what I was doing, not pretending to do, actually doing. So if you're not having fun, I would ask you to examine the places. If you've got to wait to the 20th hour to do something to push you across the line, I would ask you sincerely and gently and compassionately to examine what those things are. And be curious. Don't beat yourself up. But if you're pushing yourself, waiting to the last minute and pushing yourself to drive yourself across the line, I'm going to suggest that you're doing some things, or maybe a lot more things than you thought, that you just shouldn't be doing.
Well, I'm sure you're right on that. And I'll definitely give that some thought and work on that area without trying to orchestrate. But what it boils down to for me, without that. And Philip, for me, it's just being more of who I am and not trying to show up a certain way that I think others expect me to be.
Yeah, that's a big one for people. Ronsley?
Yeah, that was great. Thanks, Jay. Philip, I think that's also an interesting point where we want to be ourselves and not do something for someone else. But a lot of the times we don't know the difference because we've done something so often and so repeatedly that we think we're doing it because we want to do it. So that's the hard part with sitting with stuff. And going back to what Sierra said and what Philip said to Sierra about outrunning these or out fighting or outworking these internal issues, why they don't work is that they don't go away. It's just it's like they got to make friends with it and sit with it long enough to like, and I think it's like a bit of training. It's like I mean, I don't have kids, but I just feel like if I did have kids, I'd be a gentler person to them now because I'm a gentler person to myself. And I feel like through growing up, because of the different systems that were around us, the different systems with education, with religion, with society, with politics, different things around us, right? Made us think that made us have these different defense mechanisms. And it's really, really important to not beat ourselves up about it when we figure out that was a defense mechanism and we didn't know it before, but now we know it. And it's like, oh my God, it's so simple. Why didn't I think of that before? I'm such an idiot. That just sucks. Now I've lost all these years. Like, pay attention to that. That is also part of the programming. Yeah. Is anyone else would like to volunteer? Melanie, I love that. Thank you. Amazing. Melanie's amazing.
I volunteered because I knew Ronsley was giving me the eye. I don't share much. I rarely contribute, and it's been a pattern throughout my whole life. When I was in kindergarten, I used to be the one inside drawing while the kids were out playing, and I'd watch them on the outside. And all of my career choices and everything has put me in a place where I can see a lot of people, but I don't have to. I'm an accountant by trade, and so I know everything that's going on, but I don't have to contribute. And I'm tired of that. And I have learned a lot, and I see a lot, and I want to have my own voice and speak my own truth. And it's really frightening to me because when you don't talk openly or out loud a lot, it's like you don't know where to start. So, or for me, it's like I don't know. It sounds really goofy, but I don't know like how to start the story or how to start the dialogue for a podcast. Like
So
what
Melanie, I'm going to jump in for a second. And I'm going to ask a question that I love to ask. And that is this. If you did know where to start, where would you start?
if I did know where to start?
Yep.
Well, what I found so interesting is when you said one last podcast, that actually helped me to say I would start with what was most important to me.
By the way, Melanie, can I ask a question? Do you have a photograph of me? I hope no is the answer because it might be a little bit weird for you, but do you have a massive poster up on the ceiling of me in your room?
No.
No. So I would love, and I know it's weird because we're on Zoom, but I would love you to look at the screen and allow us to see you.
How do you mean?
I would like you to look at the screen as exactly what you're doing right now. Because when you start to talk, you just do this and you drift. And it's not just because you're partially in your head and whatever. I don't buy into the body language stuff. I'm not saying there's no value, and I'm sure there's something.
No, I can't see you at all, but that's okay.
It's okay. And I don't even need you to take your glasses off. I want to see you. I want to see you. And I think that's essentially what you're talking about here. Because you've been hiding behind spreadsheets. And I don't mean that in a judgmental way at all. I just want to see you. So go back to my question, if you don't mind. If you did have the answer and you did know where to start, what emerges for you? It may not be perfect, but what emerges for you? What comes up?
The thing that I've learned most, I had a near-death experience about 10 years ago, and I learned the true meaning of meaningful abundance. It wasn't what I thought it was. And I have actually used my training in accounting to translate into fixing my life. And it's now a life that I love. And I'm very joy filled. I live my life fully, and I have everything that I need right now. So,
So hang on, that's not the person we met a few minutes ago.
but that's the part that if nobody saw me, you would see.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So that's what people might see if they didn't actually know you. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's the person that I'm trying to be, I mean, seen as, because I'm mostly quiet, and it's when
Okay.
people see me, I'm just kind of doing my own thing. So I don't draw a lot of attention. I don't, I'm just kind of a quiet person.
Okay. So I'm confused what you want, because I heard very clearly that you want to find your voice and you want to speak it into the world. That's what I heard.
I
And that
do.
feels like you're backtracking and you're saying you're doing a great job hiding from the world and everyone thinks you're happy and you're awesome. And that might actually be okay. Maybe I'll just hit pause and just stay there.
Well, I believe that what I have learned and experienced can help a lot of other people avoid a lot of the pain that I went through for not living my own truth and not.
With respect, I'm less concerned about the pain you've gone through.
Mhm.
I'm really interested in the pain you're in right now. Not the pain of me speaking to you, even though I'm sure that can be desperately painful because I'm a pain in the ass. Ask my wife. And again, I don't want you to even talk about this right now, okay? But there is something beyond magical when someone gives you an insight into how painful their life is now. And are you Canadian?
No.
I was going to make one of my Canadian friends because they always say sorry for crying and sorry for this and sorry for that. They don't. It's all humans, so don't take it personally. But you're burning so much energy right now, trying to keep it together and trying to just stay just outside of the emotional zone. And you're the sort of person that you need to cry for at least a fucking month. I mean, purge and cry and wail and get it out of your system.
Okay.
And I think if you allow yourself to experience and get in touch with the real cost rather than, and I say this with, again, love, I know we don't know each other, so please take this in the way that it's meant. I may not deliver it brilliantly, but it comes from a place of compassion. And that is, if you could just let go of the idea of telling yourself that you're happy and that everything's awesome and everything else, and just allow yourself to fall into the uncomfortableness. And maybe that's scary because you've been there before and you don't want to go back there. I learned an incredible lesson for somebody years ago where they said to me, I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you? And they said 9. And then I said confidence 9 and something else. And it was 9.5. And I said, when's your coaching program starting? And she said, what do you mean I don't coach? And I said, because I want to sign up. Because 9 is pretty much perfect. It's almost perfect. And of course, we strive for perfection, which doesn't exist. And that stupid fucking saying, shoot for the moon and you'll hit the stars or whatever, fill in the blank. And I hope you don't have it on your walls, guys, if you do. Like, why would you shoot for perfection when it doesn't exist? I mean, it just, and then just falls short, which validates how we beat ourselves up, which is Ronsley's point from earlier on. But it turns out, I said, what am I not seeing here? Because the person in front of me is not the person that gave me 4 9s or 3 9s or whatever it is. What am I not seeing? And she said, I went through serious depression and I learned an extraordinary lesson that day. And I realized, now I understand it. Because when you fall into the dark and the darkness, when you feel that there is no bottom to that pit, when you feel you are absolutely out of control and you have the courage to pull yourself out of that depth and you just get to the treading of the water, it feels like you've climbed Mount Everest. And it feels like a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10. But here's the challenge with that. You have to begin to believe that you're not that person anymore, that the parts of you that fell into the depth, you're not going to do that anymore. And that the only way I know how to get out of that is to, amongst healing, is impact, is about bringing that pain and doing something good with it. It is the only thing that I have found that has been the most effective thing. And what happens is you start to see that actually you've done a great job, but there's so much more for you in the world. So I don't know if what I'm saying makes any sense. I think it is. This is what I'm feeling right now, but I'd love you to maybe sit with that a little bit longer. But I want to commend you for sharing your voice today. And you haven't stopped looking at the goddamn camera for the last couple of minutes. And I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but when you look at the camera, you are very fucking attractive. And I'm a married man, so I'm not hitting on you, and I know this is public, but what I mean by that is you give off this beautiful energy. Look at her face. But you were hiding. You were like, looking around at the big poster of me on the wall, or the poster of Ronsley, or whatever it is up there. That's not showing up. This is what showing up looks like.
Thank you, Philip. Okay, I'll think about it.
So you go hit pause button and go cry for a few days. And then come out of there and say, Rod, I'm going to do something with this fucking pain. And I'm going to help people that perhaps maybe I overstayed the mark a little bit. Maybe I stayed in accounting just that little bit too long. Maybe I stayed in ABC Limited or incorporated just that extra 25 years that I shouldn't have stayed, or whatever the number is. I'm not trying to age you, just whatever the number is. But you know what? I can beat the shit out of myself for that, or I can pretend I'm happy, or I can do something with it. You decide. And the doing something with it doesn't have to be a #1 New York Times bestselling author. It can just be you, and I don't mean just in a negative, diminishing context. It can be you on a podcast or in a conversation saying, guys, I've been there, I am there, and I don't want that for you. All right?
Thank you. And thank you for Ronsley for encouraging me to raise my hand.
I'm super excited that everyone can see you and hear you, Melanie, because that's exactly what we see when you, especially in the breakout rooms. I'm like, why isn't Melanie bringing this to the main group? And I'm so happy that you did that, and you. And I also want to commend everyone that went before, because each one of you laid that platform for Melanie to go. That's exactly why we acknowledge our ancestors at the start, because of the platforms we've been given, and being grateful for the stuff we already have. So, Philip, maybe we have time for one more question, if that's cool.
Yeah, Steve has his hand up.
I just have a comment for Melanie, and that is, when I was going through a very difficult time, you mentioned near-death experience in my life. Those stories are one of the things that helped me the most. It got me through some really, really tough times. So that's just a comment. I know you mentioned that. I just thought I'd put that out there.
Can I make a suggestion of something that I've never ever done before? And if Melanie wants this, and if Steve's up for it, then maybe we can introduce you guys offline. But I'd love you guys to connect and have a conversation. Okay, doesn't have to be a formal coaching call or anything like that. Just I know I trust Steve implicitly with his ability to hold space, and I couldn't, he's a great guy, and I think you guys having a conversation, and I know Steve is very generous with his time, and I just think it would be really cool if you guys could just connect offline and have a 30-minute phone call and just hold space for each other. Or actually, no, it's not hold space for each other. Steve, what I'm really asking is if you could hold space for Melanie, that would be really super cool.
Thank you, Steve. That was so cool and generous, and how that all went down. Anyone else we can help before we wind this up? By the way, Rowan is on this call. Rowan, every week we have a system I've implemented in all our meetings, that we always start with our wins, because I forget, we just look at the issues. And my win for last week was our conversation, Rowan, because I had, and no one really understood it in the team. Like, what do you mean your conversation with Rowan? There was no context. So then I had to give them context about how I met your dad at a retreat in Bali that I was speaking at, and how you came to We Are Podcast 2016. as a totally different person, and you're a very, very different person today. And just having that conversation with you where you coached me last week was incredible. So thank you. Just want to give you that shout out.
So here's what I'm going to suggest, Ronsley, is we don't have another question. So why don't we do this? Why don't you identify one thing you're going to do as a result of this little series or even the conversation today? And I'm going to ask you to think about it through the lens of being gentle or compassionate to self. Okay. Please don't post it on the chat or even to yourself with respect that you're going to launch 4 podcasts in the next 6.5 days and you're going to do 8 episodes a week, because that will not turn me on at all. And I certainly won't be listening. What one gentle thing are you going to do as it relates? And again, contextualize it back to voice, finding voice, sharing a little bit more. One of the questions, I'm not sure if this is the question Ronsley's referring to, but one of the questions I love that I often ask, and that is, what is the one conversation you're simply not having? Or what is the most important conversation? This is the question. What is the most important conversation that you're simply not having right now? And at any point in our journeys, all of us, every single person is avoiding a conversation at any particular juncture in their life, maybe multiple, but don't go there. Okay. What is the one conversation? What is the one thing you want to share into the world? Whether it's on a podcast, which is often obviously a very public domain, or whether it's privately, what is that one thing that you're going to commit to do? And then at a raise of hands, who wants to be kept accountable on a Facebook group to complete that? Raise your hands. Very few people. Okay, so because we're not going to do that. Okay. And you know why? Because we trust you. And we trust that if this is meaningful, you'll do it on your own. Okay. I thought that was kind of funny. I maybe didn't go down well, but I'll rehearse it the next time. And do you want to hear some good news? Ronsley, do you care about the score of Liverpool and Atlanta? I can't believe it. Actually, for the first time ever, I've actually looked at my phone and checked a score of a sport. Ronsley, are you okay if I tell you the score? Ronsley is a massive Liverpool supporter.
You think I didn't have the score open here on the right-hand side and I was not looking at it?
Did you not care about people? How could you be? You were watching the match, aren't you, when we've been all chatting? Anyway, Liverpool, as wouldn't be no surprise, are being crushed right now, like humiliated. Like it's horrendous. But anyway, I won't go into the details of the score.
Why didn't you bring it up when Liverpool were winning?
So I don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, moving swiftly on. Great to see everyone's faces. Ronsley, you really are responsible for bringing this together, for you and I connecting. So why don't you leave us all with the last word? And please don't talk about Liverpool.
You brought it up. I can't believe you were keeping track of the score. That was cool. Thank you, Philip. This has been amazing. Just I feel anyone that has attended through this, myself included, got so much from an opening standpoint. Like, we go into these places because we see ourselves in other people, and when some people show up like all of you have and hold space the way you have, we get an opportunity to go to places that we haven't been within ourselves for a long time. So I'm so glad that I got the opportunity to do this with you all, with you, Philip. Have fun. Just realize that your voice doesn't necessarily need to be found. It's just there. You just need to use it. The more you use it, the more you realize how to refine it. And that's the thing. You can't sound perfect if you don't use it. And it's all part of the learning. So use it, learn from it, let people criticize it, refine it, stand for what you believe in, and we'll see you on the journey. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Philip, you legend. Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks, Ronsley. Appreciate you.
See you, everyone.
See you guys. Take care.